I found the perfect apartment, signed the lease alone, faced anger from my best friend, and now consider asking her to leave. Hello everyone. I am an 18-year-old female and my best friend, who is 30 years old and also female, and I live together. As I am not a native English speaker, please overlook any mistakes I might make. The entire narrative begins when I started college, where I met a friend whom I will refer to as Emily. She is more extroverted, while I am somewhat reserved, creating a good balance between us. It did not take long for us to become best friends. We entered college in the same year, attended the same classes, and lived in nearby dormitories. After 4 months in the dorms, we both concluded that it was not the best situation for us, and I wanted to move out soon because of my kitten. Initially, Emily planned to move out with other people, but they left her in the lurch, and one of them even withdrew from college. Subsequently, she approached me and asked if I would like to become roommates. I was happy to agree since I hadn't made many friends at school, and this was a pleasant surprise for me. Not long after, we began searching for an apartment. I realized partway through this process that she had not made any effort to find a place. Whenever I asked for her assistance, she always had an excuse and would request that I take photos of the places I chose to visit, rarely accompanying me to view them. When I confronted her about it, she merely responded, "Give me the agent's numbers and I will contact them." However, the most challenging tasks involved obtaining the agent's numbers and viewing the properties, both of which I was handling. I stayed silent and continued searching for apartments. Many prospective apartments had numerous issues, and I had to pass on several good options while she went out to dinners with guys. I am not exaggerating. That is exactly what she did. Eventually, I found a newly constructed apartment that I deemed perfect for my needs. I informed her about it, emphasizing that this would be the last one I would be considering. If it did not meet her requirements, I believed she would need to find another roommate. The following day, I signed the lease. The apartment is solely in my name because I was the only one present during the signing. I was eager to move into an apartment since I had a kitten at the time, and we were not permitted to keep her in the dorms. When I informed Emily of the signed lease, she reacted with anger because I had not discussed it with her. When I reminded her that I had specifically told her the day before, she went quiet, only to later accuse me of not considering her feelings. To clarify, the apartment has a room connected to the entrance and the kitchen, but there is no door in the kitchen passage. There is another room connected to the kitchen and a bathroom. I had previously mentioned that I would be taking the room connected to the bathroom for my cat's litter tray. She insisted that I kept changing my preferences based on the apartment. I wished to explain to her, though I didn't, that I found the house and naturally would prioritize my own preferences. If you look at it from my perspective, I believe it was justified. She calmed down when I suggested that we could both chip in for the door. She agreed, and we eventually settled down. Now, for the main issue. We have been living together for 3 months, and I have come to realize that she is not the type of person I wish to live with due to numerous arguments over household matters. I have also noticed that she has not been fair with shared expenses. For example, I incurred an expense of $20 for the house, while she had an expense of $1,025. Her calculation was $1,025 plus 20 divided by 2, instead of $1,025 plus 35 divided by 2, and so forth. This meant I would be paying her the expense I had covered. When I pointed this out, she responded with a rolling eye, which I found disrespectful, though I chose not to mention it at the time to avoid conflict. Also, I should mention that we are both part of the same friend group, which consists of 2 additional people besides us. Over time, I noticed that she was increasingly inconsiderate. I kept to myself for the most part. Recently, I faced a health issue, and I consulted Emily since our friends encouraged her to accompany me. I felt somewhat uncomfortable with her presence during the doctor's appointment, but did not voice my concerns, as I felt obligated to allow her to enter the office. She learned about my condition, which is a minor skin infection that I find quite embarrassing to discuss. When anyone asked about it, I would downplay the situation by saying it was merely a skin infection, hoping to end the topic. However, Emily would openly declare the exact nature of the infection, leaving me quite taken aback. A few days after my doctor's appointment, I took medication that was not mandatory but recommended by the doctor to help with my symptoms, which was a mild sedative that I was advised to use before sleep. Unfortunately, the medication was stronger than necessary, and I ended up waking up the next afternoon. I struggled to get up but hurried to college. I explained to my professor why I was late, and my kind teacher understood my predicament and allowed me to present my project. Afterwards, during a casual conversation, my professor inquired about my well-being and the situation. I explained that due to the health issue I had, I needed to take a first-line sedative, a type that also alleviates itching. I mentioned that I was taking this common medication for the first time since my parents typically find it overly harsh, but since the doctor recommended it, I decided to try it. Unfortunately, it did not go as planned, hence my tardiness. Emily was present throughout this conversation, which did not bother me until she informed the professor exactly what my condition was, which infuriated me. I actually confronted her in front of my professor to ask why she had disclosed that information, to which she replied, "Okay, you can tell her yourself." The issue was that I used the term health issue to halt the conversation, as I had no intention of revealing more. Later, I requested that we talk privately, but she brought both our friends into the discussion. I attempted to address my feelings, but she responded with, "I didn't do anything wrong," and her reply remained consistent regardless of my input. She also has a habit of interrupting others while they are speaking, which I found increasingly frustrating. Eventually, I raised my voice and grew somewhat unruly as I felt unheard and ignored. When she belittled my feelings, something inside me broke and I started crying. She left the conversation, offering no comfort, insisting again that she didn't do anything wrong. My friends did their best to console me, but I had a complete breakdown and called my parents, requesting that they come to pick me up, which effectively separated me from her for a while. Things did not improve in the evening either. I returned home before Emily, and when she eventually came back, she brought along one of our friends whom I will call Jim. She entered my room to inform me that I would be responsible for the electricity bill during the days when she wasn't home. This period dated back nearly 2 months. I was taken aback by this demand. She then asked me to join her in her room to discuss the finances. When I entered her room, she and Jim sat on her bed while I remained near the table, and she explained that during her time away at her parents' house, she wanted me to cover the bill for that duration. I was at a loss for words, as she and Jim appeared much closer, and I felt outnumbered. After all the discussions and calculations, I merely asked her what made her think that was reasonable. She casually mentioned, "The pickle thing." The pickle incident occurred when we went grocery shopping for our household items. I craved pickles and asked her if we should buy some for our place. Strangely, she declined, saying she wouldn't eat pickles. However, since I wanted them, I decided to purchase them for myself. I double-checked with her multiple times to ensure she really did not want any. Later, when our friends Jim and another friend, whom I will call Alex, visited our home, they had pickles and so did Emily. I had no problem with this. However, after that day, I saw her eating pickles regularly over the next few days. I confronted her, asking if she would be willing to share the cost of the pickles now that she enjoyed them. She agreed, and I thought that would be the end of it. Unfortunately, that was not the case. That evening, I called my mother to explain the situation. She was furious that Emily had made such a request. According to her, once people live together, such matters should not arise, particularly between close friends, as it fosters distance. She always advised me to be the bigger person concerning finances, but I felt slightly reassured about my feelings being validated in this context. I decided to spend time with Alex instead of staying with Emily. Fast forward to the next day, the 4 of us, Emily, Jim, Alex, and I sat down to discuss and ideally resolve the tensions between Emily and me. At some point, the conversation shifted back to the electricity bill, and Emily again mentioned that the pickle thing had deeply hurt her feelings. I asked Jim what Emily had told him about the pickle incident. He remarked that Emily claimed I had asked her to cover the cost of the pickles when their group had visited. He added that she never informed him of the fact that I had asked her multiple times whether she wanted to buy any pickles. When I turned to Emily, she seemed nervous and blurted out, "I forgot," then added, "But it still hurt me." Jim became so frustrated by her response that he told her to be quiet, stating that it couldn't possibly hurt so badly since she, referring to me, did everything right and doesn't come from a wealthy background like you. For reference, I come from a solid middle-class family, whereas Emily belongs to an upper-class family. She fell silent, and the conversation gradually turned in my favor. By the end of the discussion, she was crying and begging me to communicate how she could repair our friendship, insisting that she did not want to lose me. At that point, I was feeling kind, but I was no longer interested in discussing anything. However, I still accompanied her to a nearby cafe where she repeatedly apologized. I went along with it as I wanted to conclude the conversation. Later that day, I had to leave for my parents' home. Coincidentally, she also wanted to leave at the same time and informed everyone that she was going home the following day. On my way to the airport, I realized that she had completely tarnished my reputation among friends. Jim called me and relayed how she had lied not only to him, but also to approximately 6 to 7 other individuals. Even if her claim of forgetting was true, she could have easily recalled the details while speaking to the rest of our friends, which she clearly did not. Compiling all this information, he expressed disbelief in her claims of wanting to fix everything and not wanting to lose our friendship because, during the discussion, it escalated into an argument. I'm embarrassed to say that we both threatened one another, but she had no real leverage against me and seemed to recognize that if I were to speak up, she would face significant consequences. He suspected her fear motivated her plea for reconciliation. Otherwise, if not for my knowledge of certain details, she would have likely lashed out and behaved aggressively. I had been contemplating asking her to move out, but I struggle with addressing it due to how she might react. Jim and my parents have advised me to consider this option, especially since they have grown to dislike Emily due to numerous past incidents they have observed where she has put both of us in difficult situations, which I mostly had to navigate. Overall, would I be the antagonist for asking her to leave my apartment? Story 2. I cut my hair after years of feeling trapped. My parents criticized me for wanting to be myself, calling me a disappointment. I am 20 years old, a woman, and I do not reside in the United States. However, I cannot find a more suitable place to express myself. I apologize for the length of my message, but it is necessary for me to share my feelings. I come from a rather unusual Christian family, having always lived according to their beliefs and regulations. Since I was a child, I have been the daughter who obeyed them the most. They have always held more authority than I do, and I have consistently listened to them. I regret my compliance a few months ago. From a young age, I was immersed in church teachings. I can name all the books of the Pentateuch, and I wish I could claim that this was done willingly, but it was not. I acknowledge that my family is abusive, like many others, yet they refuse to see or accept it. Their perception matters to them, but I honestly do not care. I endured abuse and neglect from my parents as a child. I recall that they would argue every night at 9 o'clock. I would glance at the clock, hoping that it was past that hour, as only then could I sleep peacefully. As a child, I developed anxiety related to nighttime. I always aimed to be as inconspicuous as possible to avoid their attention. Yes, it was cowardly, especially with both a younger and an older brother. However, can I change the past? I cannot, nor would I have done much differently. I was as cowardly and invisible as everyone else, especially since their most intense arguments occurred at that hour. After returning from church in the evening, they would always yell at each other, though I do not remember the reasons, only the fear that lingered in my memories. This was before I turned 9. By the time I was 15 or 16, their conflicts began to lessen. They ceased physical fighting, engaging instead in loud arguments that became less intimidating over time. Eventually, they stopped altogether, possibly because my mother started hitting my younger brother. My memories of this situation are hazy. I try to forget the past, but it always resurfaces. This is not the entirety of their actions towards us. There are worse stories, but I lack the desire to delve into them. I had often been overlooked. There was no golden child in our home. We all faced punishment for even minor infractions because my father used violence against us. We endured spankings, shouted at in frightening tones, ignored throughout the day, and then reprimanded again. That is how I remember my childhood. As I matured, things began to shift. As previously mentioned, the shouting diminished in intensity and became more muted. They ignored us more, particularly me. My mother frequently made remarks like, "I remember when she was younger, she was my quietest baby. I could leave her in her crib, and she wouldn't cry even if I neglected to provide her dinner. I became the punchline of the ghost child joke. Then my younger siblings were born. There is a 13-year age gap between us. I took on the role of their nanny. I changed their diapers because our parents were too busy with work. They would wake me up at dawn to care for the little ones. Always the nanny, always in the background, never allowed a moment's respite, as everything they did was my responsibility. I was not compensated for this. Instead, I received the same scolding I had heard throughout my childhood. After breakfast, it was always off to church. I hold no objections to it. The teachings of Christ sound peaceful, it appears peaceful, but not when followed by a fanatic. My father is one, despite claiming that he is divinely chosen in his dreams. I do not believe him. When he instructs me that Christians must dress or speak a certain way, I am flooded with memories of his insults, his belt against my skin, and my body shaking whenever he raised his voice. My mother was no saint either. She was even worse. She was meant to protect me and nurture me, but she failed. As a child, she became my second nightmare. If my father wasn't causing me pain, it was her. Her words were just as hurtful. Although she didn't insult me as harshly as my father, she called me useless so many times that I still struggle to overcome it. Around the time I turned 15, the violence finally ceased. Yes, they still shouted at each other, but the intensity had lessened considerably. I could ignore them, as their arguments no longer affected me. For a time, I lived in peace until the pandemic struck. School was my refuge. I had friends there, many, actually, but one in particular always brought a smile to my face. He passed away during the lockdown, and it hit me hard, although I did not show it. When my mother informed me, my father watched me with a mocking gaze as I tried to cry. During that time, my little cat, Kay, was always right by my side. She offered me comfort when no one else did. She had 2 kittens because my mother refused to spay her. I lacked the funds and assistance. How is someone confined at home supposed to know the location of a veterinarian? Despite every negative aspect I have mentioned, I loved them, or I think I did. I am uncertain. I could not hold on to hatred toward them, and I do not understand why. We lived like any average lower-class family. Occasionally, we ventured out. If we were fortunate, we would visit the zoo 3 times a year. We saw our grandparents about a dozen times each year. However, every Sunday without exception we attended church. I recall the times when I didn't want to go. When I was ill and running a fever, I stayed behind, feeling suffocated at the table. When my father and siblings returned from church, he would find me sitting at the same table as before, and he would almost strike me. Whenever I stated that I was sick, my mother dismissed it, telling me it was nothing. I have asthma. I tend to ramble, and I feel as though I am extending this unnecessarily. Returning to the topic of my cat, she was always there for me. My heart belonged to her and hers to me, but she died. On her miserable deathbed, I wanted to take her to the vet, but they refused, declaring it a waste. I watched her take her final breath right before my eyes. I promised her I would care for her kittens, and here I am, keeping that promise. Last year, my cat, Yu, passed away. She was the oldest of the kittens, my closest companion. I could have intervened, but they assured me that she would recover, that taking her to the vet wouldn't be worth it, calling it a waste. They mocked my naivete, reminding me of my lack of funds for such measures. She was not the only one we lost. Chickens, pigs, and geese all died, having grown up in cramped quarters. With my exclusion from menial tasks, I was assigned to household chores. I poured my heart into caring for them, and they all died. Some time ago, I had a litter of kittens. In the middle of the night, my mother took 2 of them away. My brother managed to bring one back. The other, my older brother, that despicable person, claimed that some dogs had attacked it. That haunting image stayed with me. I wanted to sleep, tried to detach myself emotionally, but my heart would not let me. Everyone else ate, lived, laughed, and moved on with their lives just as they always did. But not me. For 5 years, I had been out of sync with them. I repressed 5 years' worth of tears due to shame, embarrassed to cry, scream, or express myself beyond mere jokes because they laughed at those. So I decided to change. I wanted something for myself, something outside of the monotonous routine. I wanted to liberate myself from the burden of 47 centimeters of hair. The weight was stifling when I tied it up, pulling out strands, making my forehead appear larger, and causing discomfort when it chafed against my skin. I was tired of picking up the same hair every day. I was exhausted from studying for life-altering exams. I was weary of this existence, tired of silently crying. So I did it. In the bathroom. In Christianity, women are expected to maintain long hair as a veil. I despised my hair. I detested wearing skirts. I do not identify as transgender for that I simply wanted to be myself. I refused to conform to their expectations. I do not want to be a housewife. I wish to earn a living without their discouraging remarks about pursuing employment. I sought happiness, even in something as straightforward as a haircut. I went straight to my father and shared the news about the cat. He seemed indifferent. He dismissed my reasons as trivial but remained unconcerned about my haircut. My mother, on the other hand, reacted strongly. She yelled at me, berating me for how I looked, questioning how I could do such a thing to my hair despite me telling her for weeks that I hated it, that I wanted a salon visit, and that I intended to pay for the haircut myself. Her response, she said, "Do whatever you wish. Ultimately, it is your decision." Then she went directly to my father, and together they confronted me in the living room. He called me a hypocrite regarding my faith, ridiculing me for clinging to my deceased pets, insisting that I had no genuine connection to the church, and that I only got angry when excluded from church activities. For context, I find children unbearable. My only graduation celebration with friends I would not see again for 2 years occurred when I was 13. They purchased my dress, but while they ran errands, they left me to manage my sister and finish household chores as I struggled to put on my graduation gown. I watched her crawl towards the flower pots within the house. I moved her away from the mess while trying to dress myself. Upon their return, my mother changed her diaper, summoned my father, and he punished me for the dirt found in her diaper. I could not enjoy that celebration. Then they urged me to relax about looking after my younger siblings, even though I felt guilty for dancing to popular music. I love Katy Perry. But back then, I felt as if I was sinning because that is how they made me feel. That is why I have such disdain for children. I cannot tolerate them. When I see them, I am reminded of how miserable they made my life. It is selfish, but that is who I am. Returning to the scene in the living room, my mother shouted, "You cut your hair for worldly reasons. How could you do that to your hair? It's because of that phone, isn't it?" The phone I am using to write this was a gift from my uncle. They practically labeled me the family's disappointment. I cried, but I stopped when it came to the part about Katy Perry. I do not even listen to her music anymore. Currently, I enjoy other bands, but in secret. Like many other things, I cherish them in secret. But I no longer desire that. I feel as if cutting my hair was an overreaction. It seems I should not have done it. It feels as though I crafted unnecessary drama, but all I wanted was to feel like myself. I aimed to assert my own decisions. Now, however, I feel horrible. I assured them my hair would grow back in a few months, but now I suspect they resent me. What can I do for the time being? Am I the one at fault here? Story 3. Am I the a-hole for calling off a new relationship after learning my partner is food insecure? This event occurred in the past, but last year, I experienced a 3-month period of conversation in which they persuaded me they were earning a full-time income and successfully living independently while managing their expenses. During our conversations, I confided in them about my life stressors, and I felt guilty about the emotional effort involved. To make amends, I proposed that we go out for a nice dinner. However, they managed to run up the bill to over $100 at a taco restaurant. They didn't finish their meals. They only wanted to sample a little bit of everything. The following day, it was time for them to leave my house because I needed to work from home, WFH, and had an important academic deadline, which meant I had a significant workload. Yet, they refused to leave until they had eaten. I had a fully stocked fridge, an ample freezer, and a well-supplied pantry. I informed them that they could eat anything they wanted, and I would be happy to help prepare it. They claimed everything was unappetizing and requested that I order food through a delivery service. I had fish, numerous vegetables, beans, sweets, fruits, and all sorts of items available. It wasn't as if my fridge was empty, containing only a random bottle of ketchup. Regardless, I consented to their request. They made me order from 3 different places, one specifically for donuts, another for fried chicken, and a grocery store for salmon and strawberries. I expressed that I felt this was excessive after I had already spent $100 on dinner the previous night. However, I felt uncomfortable being rude if I pushed back further, especially since they had already disregarded my refusals. So I surrendered, thinking it might indeed be rude of me to decline. They insisted on staying. They ate to the point of discomfort, then woke up to have another meal, entering yet another food coma before finally leaving with the leftover donuts late at night. A few days later, they insisted on coming over to eat my food. They claimed they hadn't eaten all day, admitted they had been food insecure, and mentioned that their apartment's maintenance staff had just stolen $500 in cash, leaving them starving. I informed them it was a workday, I work during the evenings, and asked if they truly needed me that much because I didn't have time to socialize, yet I didn't want to let them go hungry, as that would be disrespectful to my girlfriend. This person forced their way into my home to eat my food after I had already said no 3 times. Immediately afterward, I reached out to a few friends and expressed my concerns, sensing something was amiss. I told them that I didn't want to be in a relationship with someone who was food insecure. They told me it was wrong for me to feel that way about someone just because of their food insecurity. I felt guilty, which led me to stay in the relationship. This person ended up stealing my grandmother's jewelry and attempting to control all my finances, which I believe turned into financial abuse. I felt that a genuinely food-insecure individual would have appreciated what I provided instead of insisting on ordering from a delivery service for their every craving. I prepared large portions of fish, rice, and vegetables. They tried to make me feel like my own cooking was unappetizing and that I needed to cater to them every single day. It was overwhelming, and I believe that someone genuinely facing food insecurity might not have wanted to deplete my finances on delivery if I were their source of food security. I wanted to be with someone who appreciated me for who I am rather than using me for something. Previously, I believed that nobody dates solely for free food, as it would be an inefficient return on investment for faking a relationship. However, I came to realize that some people are genuinely starving. It frustrated me that this person continually disrupted my career by showing up unannounced after I had said no, demanding that I leave work to let them in and feed them, or else they would face dire consequences. This individual showed no respect for my personal boundaries, guilting me into believing that if they starved, it would be my fault. When I declined their visits, they would appear anyway. Yet my friends persisted in making me feel guilty about being a bad person for not wanting to date them. My therapist did the same, stating that it was immoral to react this way towards someone who was starving. Sometimes, I still feel that my beliefs are unpopular, but I am not a food bank, and I do not wish to be their girlfriend. It deeply troubled me that people labeled me ungrateful for my girlfriend when I was ungrateful precisely because I did not want to be involved with them. Why do I not have the right to refuse a person I find unattractive? Why is there a moral obligation for me to enter into a relationship with them? Why aren't they morally obligated to accept that my no means no? Am I truly the antagonist for not wanting to be with someone experiencing food insecurity, while I was already dealing with my own significant stress that they did not alleviate? Deep down, I believe I am not in the wrong, but I seek validation because people keep telling me I am. Edit. Thank you, everyone. I cried multiple times last night as I had numerous realizations. Your comments significantly helped me understand the dehumanization I have experienced in my life, which created a context where I ever thought any of these individuals warranted any credibility. Clearly, these people were deceitful. I am saddened that I doubted my reality enough to reach a point where their gaslighting had any effect on me. However, I am not surprised. Abuse has been a persistent issue in my life to the extent that this situation seemed mild relative to how I have typically been treated. Yet, in the end, it was just as damaging because there is one fundamental question: does this person care about me? If they do not, they will go as far as is convenient for them. Just because they were forcing their way into my home, insulting me, and demanding I order delivery does not mean they are less willing to jeopardize my well-being and ruin my life than others who have been more overtly abusive. I hope one day I can have healthy relationships with friends and partners who treat me with respect, but I am currently skeptical that will ever happen. It is starting to feel like my only chance for a genuinely meaningful connection is if I raise my own child in the future. Unfortunately, it will be a long time before that occurs because I need a certain level of financial stability and career standing before I feel comfortable doing that.